Do you want to start living up to your full thrifting potential? If so, then you clicked on the right video because we're going to be going through some amazing thrift tips that I have compiled over the many years that I've been thrifting. I've been thrifting for a long time. Probably almost 10 years at this point. And the first item that I ever bought with my own money was actually thrifted. And it was this Dora the Explorer mug. And I still love it, still use it. And I got it for 25 cents. I just want you to have that same joyous feeling in finding the perfect item and having the best thrift trip ever. Tip number 1, make a list. Whether paper, digital, or even a Pinterest board, having a list can be a game changer for thrifting. Just like athletes have a playbook and a game plan when they go on the field, you need to have a game plan of your own. Because thrifting is a sport, don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Your list can contain literal items such as coffee mug, or boots, or sneakers. Or it can just be this beautiful batch of images and colors and feelings. It can be as abstract or literal as you want. So once you have your list or your mood board or your inspirations in place, we can move on to tip number 2, which is dressing for the thrift. Dressing for the thrift looks different for everybody, and it certainly looks different at the bins. But we're gonna get to that in another video. I'm gonna have a whole video on thrifting at the bins and outlet stores tips, but that's not today. We're focusing on traditional building thrift stores. Your fit for the thrift is gonna look different depending on who you are, what your comfort levels are, just what you feel good in. But I suggest wearing something that is easy to put clothes over, just in case your thrift store doesn't have dressing rooms. So for me, that's usually a dress like this. So if I wear a dress like this, and I understand not everyone is comfortable in dresses, but if I wear a dress like this, then I can just slide stuff over, or I can slide pants and skirts underneath. You also want to make sure that you have shoes that you're comfortable in. As much as it would be fun to have like really nice heels and stuff, you're going to a thrift store and your feet are probably going to be killing you by the end of the day. A good alternative for dresses is usually some sort of athletic pants or shorts like leggings, and something that is just not too out there, like maybe like a tank top or a t-shirt, but you don't really want anything with like big puffs and ruffles because it's gonna really affect the way that the clothes would fit you if you're trying them on over your clothes. So now that you're all dressed and you are ready to head out the door, you need to remember one more thing, which is tip number 3, which is bring snacks and a drink, please. Refreshing. Because thrifting is such a sport, you are going to get very dehydrated and very hungry while you're out there. Sometimes I can even be out for 6 hours on particular days, and you have to have something to eat and drink during that time, or else you're not going to make it, and it's no longer going to become a fun experience. So, we have everything that we need to go to the thrift store. We're all snacked and hydrated, and we have the nice clothes, and we are just ready to go. But when do we go? Tip number 4, go on the weekdays. So I usually believe that thrifting can be done any time of day, any day of week, but I personally like to go on weekdays because there's usually less people. Go when it's not as crowded. I obviously know not everybody can go on the weekdays, and especially on the weekdays when it first opens. Although that is the best time to go because almost nobody will be there. But if you can't make it at like the 10 a.m. on the weekdays, try to still get there as early as you can on the weekends because that's when they bring everything out and that's when you have the best chance of finding stuff. Like I went in there probably around 5 p.m. today and I saw the perfect dress, and right as I was about to get it, someone took it. So the later you go, the less of a chance, unless your thrift store brings out stuff regularly throughout the day, the less of a chance that you're gonna have to find those amazing finds. All right, you've picked a good time and you are ready to go in. Now we can finally start talking about what to do when you're in the store. Which leads us to tip number 5. Start with your favorites. Something super helpful to avoid thrift store burnout is starting in your favorite section. So for me, that's dresses, but for you, it could be anything. And if you start there and you find something, great, because then it doesn't matter if the rest of the thrift trip goes terribly. And my philosophy on this is that if you start with your very favorite category and you find something, that whole trip is gonna feel like a win, even if everything else is sucky and terrible. But if you start with everything else, you could start getting decision fatigue and getting overwhelmed, and you still wanna have that great chance of finding your dream items early on. Tip number 6, go to multiple stores. As y'all will see in almost every single one of my thrifting videos, I usually go to more than 2 stores. I usually go to 3 or 4 and sometimes even 5. Sometimes when one thrift store isn't doing all that great, you want to go to a different one. And I usually find that every thrift store in every little area has its own feel. It usually has different types of clothes brought to it. And overall, by going to multiple stores, if you're able, will just create a really well-rounded trip and will allow you to find the best and the most items for your time. Speaking of finding the best items, you don't have to look far if you follow this next tip, which is tip number 7, the returns rack. You should be running to that returns rack because the clothes that are on there are clothes that people have already hand-picked, which means that you basically get a collection of clothes that people thought were great, but maybe just didn't fit them right. I like to think of the returns rack as having a little personal stylist, because if the people in the store thought those clothes were cool enough to try on, they're probably pretty good. Speaking of trying clothes on, that leads us to our next tip, which is tip number 8. Use the dressing rooms. If the thrift store that you're going to has a dressing room, use it. I cannot tell you how many stores that I've been in that didn't have dressing rooms and I had to make the best guess I could, but ultimately sometimes those things just didn't fit right. And that's such a bummer, especially when you get a really special piece and it just looks wonky, or it's slightly too tight, or it's just way too big. And then the trip was basically kind of for nothing if nothing fits right. So definitely use those dressing rooms, but that leads us to our next tip, which is about how to use the dressing rooms properly. So tip number 9, go on feeling, not look. And this only applies to the dressing rooms because most thrift store dressing rooms have really terrible lighting. And it kind of makes everything look unflattering, but if you sit there and you just feel what the clothes feel like on you, when you bring them home to try them on in your nice lighting, if they feel good, they'll most likely look good. But if they don't feel good and you think they look good in the dressing room, you still probably won't wear them. So along with all of that, that leads us to tip number 10. Look in every section. And this only applies if you have the time to look in every section, because I know a lot of people are very busy and they just don't have the time for that. And they want to have like a speed run thrift trip, which is totally okay. But if you're trying to be thorough, you gotta look in every single category because things get misplaced all the time. All the time. So to prove my point exactly of why you should check every section, I'm in the shirt section, but my favorite is dresses, and I just found a beautiful dress tucked away right in the shirts here. And also, you may find things that you never knew you wanted. I suggest looking in the craft area, the home furnishings, the electronics, the men's section, the women's section. I think gendered sections are stupid and fake. What other sections are there? The book section. Any section that exists, you should go to and at least give it a quick glance. Tip number 11, make a yes, no, and maybe pile in your cart. So for every single thrift trip I do, I have a yes pile, which is on one side of the cart, a maybe, which is in the center or that little top part, and a no, which is on the other side. And this really ties hand in hand with trying stuff on, because that will get rid of options immediately. If it does not fit, it does not stay in the cart. But even if something fits absolutely perfectly, sometimes you just don't like it as much as you thought you would. And that's totally okay. It's always better to leave something at the store than take it home and realize you kind of hate it. All right, so you found your items and you love all these items that you found. You put them all in the yes pile. So now what do? That leads us to tip number 12. Be a good thrifter. Being a good thrifter is gonna help you, it's gonna help the other shoppers, and it's definitely gonna help the employees, because oftentimes thrift stores can be understaffed, they can be crazy. You also just really wanna try to be a good person. You can do this by putting your clothes back on the return rack that we talked about earlier. If you see hangers in the aisles and just clothes on the floor, try to pick up as much of it as you can. And always, always, always put your cart back. You don't need to leave it in the middle of the parking lot. Oh, and another thing that the people at the thrift store are gonna love you for is before you get up to checkout, especially if there's a long line, this is a great thing to do while waiting, take the hangers off all of the clothes and just have them ready. Because it just saves them a little time and helps the line go so much smoother. I really hope that you enjoyed all of these wonderful thrifting tips, and if you have any that I forgot to mention, please put them down in the comments below. And I would be so happy if we could just all share this with the community and everyone could learn something new, even me. Like I said before, I will be doing perhaps even another one of these and an ultimate outlet guide, which covers your outlet stores and your bins. Because I know some of you probably love the Goodwill bins just as much as I do. All right, my beautiful friends, that is all I have for you today, but I will see you all very soon in another video. All right, bye.